Hello, my name is Hollow. Welcome to episode 3 of Learn to Play. In this episode we're going to be talking about lane control, one of the most important parts of Dota. If you've ever gone to lane and felt outmatched by the composition you've been fighting and found yourself under-leveled or under-geared, then this is the video that's going to help you out the most. This video is going to contain a lot of information for the laning phase and why it's so important. The reason it's so important is because it often dictates whether mid-game and late-game turn out well. If you find yourself losing laning phase, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle for the rest of the game. So, to help you understand the laning phase, you need some goals. The goals are very simple: get that money and get that experience. They're really simple ideas, and it's exactly what you use in real life. So let's jump into it. Experience. To get experience, you need to be within a certain range of an enemy hero or creep when it dies. It's about 1,000-yard range. If another allied hero is in range of the death, then you will split the experience equally between the other hero. This is why when you're in solo lane, you tend to level faster than other dual lanes. As you gain experience, you'll level up, your abilities will get stronger, and your hero will get stronger. Since your opponents are often trying to kill you to stop you from gaining money and experience, it's quite smart to take charge of the situation and do it to them before they can even get a chance to do it to you, allowing you to gain experience and money without any restriction, but also slowing down your enemy team. Money. In order to get money, in addition to the gold you already acquire per second, which is relatively slow but still important, you need to get creep kills in lane. This is last hitting, previously spoken about. When you get a last hit on an enemy creep, you get an additional amount of gold that otherwise would have gone to an ally if they got the last hit, or nowhere if it was denied or you just didn't get that last hit, which is potential gold lost. Both of these ideas are very simple and straightforward, but accomplishing the goals that I just explained might not be as easy as you think. The enemy team is doing exactly the same, and I'm going to attempt to get as much gold and experience as they can, but also prevent you from doing it. So, we're going to need some rules and advice that you need to understand how to make it so you get all the gold, all the experience, and the enemy doesn't. The universal golden rule of laning. If you stay in your lane longer than the opponent, you will have a bigger XP gap and gold gap between you and the opponent. This is the most important part and main idea for when you're laning. If you maximize the gap between you and your opponent's XP and gold, you set yourself up for an easier win and a higher chance of winning. If you fall behind on this gap, then you're going to be fighting an uphill battle for the rest of the game. We're going to talk about this more detailed in a minute. The golden rule ties in with regeneration. If you manage to stay in your lane longer than your opponent, you widen the XP gap and probably the gold gap too. So how do you actually stay in lane longer? Regeneration is the answer that you need. When you head out to lane, in most situations you should have regeneration items. This could be a tango, it could be a healing salve, or it could be a clarity potion for mana. Mana regeneration isn't quite important because you often find when you have no mana you're still alive, but when you have no health you're sort of dead. Healing salves or tangos. Usually the choice is up to you, whatever you prefer, but some situations might lean towards a tango and some might lean towards a healing salve. What are these situations? It depends. Do you think you're going to be getting harassed a lot by ranged auto attackers such as Clinks or Drow Ranger? meaning your healing cell will be interrupted on damage? Or are you facing more nukey people like Queen of Pain or Zeus, and you think that they're going to lower you down suddenly and you need the extra healing from a healing salve? The difference between the two is that a tango, although you get 3 of them, does less healing and much slower, and a healing salve, you only get 1 of them, but it does a lot more healing a lot quicker. But having a tango on for that healing regeneration won't be interrupted upon damage, but a healing salve will. It's all down to preference. So if you're up against burst, healing salve. If you're up against slow harassment, then most probably tangos. Personally, I like to go with tangos, but if the situation is so obvious that I need a healing salve, then healing salve. So how do I tie in the golden rule, which is to survive and be in lane longer than the opponent, to actually work in lane? Well, sometimes it's not always better to get that kill. In fact, it could be better not to get that kill. What you want to do sometimes, it's a really good idea, to lower your opponent down to the part where if he comes back anywhere near the creep for experience and gold, then you're just going to kill him. So you finish him, let him walk away on no health, and now he has to walk back all the way to spawn and either waste money on a teleport scroll or walk all the way back. So he's missing so much farm, so much experience and so much gold, while no one's stopping you from getting that farm and no one's stopping you from getting that gold either. This could be a lot more valuable than that 1 kill. Mana regeneration. Mana regeneration through clarity potions or another source, like auras, is also important for maintaining aggression on your opponents for harassment. After all, if you don't have the mana to cast your spells, how dangerous can you even be to the opponent? It's the same logic that when you're fighting someone like a silencer, he can lower your mana so much that you can't even attack, and then you're sort of useless in the lane. Couriers. In all cases dealing with regeneration, a courier can be so useful. If your lane opponents have lowered you so much that you've lost all of your starting regen, then you can just use the courier to bring you some more, and then you can stay in lane, and then all that harassment and all that mana they spent is useless, and now you have the advantage and you can start attacking them. It's always good to have a courier in a game. You should have one on your team every single game. The support should be the one buying it, and if there's no support, work it out with your team who needs to buy the courier, because you cannot go without one. Next up is harassment, weakening your opponent without the actual intent to kill. How do I harass? Harassing is pretty important in lane control and incredibly important in the laning phase. Some heroes won't actually be able to harass quite as much or as well as the heroes. Melee heroes have an obvious disadvantage because they get creep aggro. Creep aggro is when you attack an enemy hero and then the enemy creep will instantly redirect to attack you, doing quite a lot of damage over time, also blocking you from even getting anywhere near that enemy hero. Along with being melee, you have to actually walk over to the enemy hero. He can just walk away from you. Usually harassment for this reason is done by a ranged hero, whether he's a carry, nuke or support, it doesn't matter. Auto attacks are so valuable early game and they do a lot of damage over time. As long as you keep yourself in a position far from the creeps before actually attacking the enemy hero, the creeps will have to walk further to get to you and eventually just redirect before they're even able to attack you. So let's just cover that again. When performing harassment, you want to stay away from the creeps so they have to path and walk to you. You want to cast a cheap spell on the enemy if you can, or more likely just auto attack with those ranged attacks. When should I harass? Well, not all the time. Sometimes you have to play passively or be defensive, just so you can stay for the experience. If you're laned with a melee hero that is really item dependent, such as a hard carry like Faceless Void, then what you want to do is harass the enemy as much as you can. Prevent them from getting anywhere near Whenever they come in to get a last hit them with an auto attack. While they're running away, hit them with another 2. They've just lost loads of health, and now they're sort of reluctant to come and get another last hit, so they're losing gold. What about in a solo lane against another solo? Harassing here is a lot safer because they often actually lack the damage to be able to kill you, unlike dual stun lanes, for example. In this case, however, you are not contending with a teammate or trying to support one for last hits, so it's usually very easy to get last hits and also harass the opponent, keeping them low so whenever they come near they could potentially die, and giving you free farm. Remember, you need to get those last hits whenever you can. If no one gets a last hit, especially in solo, that's wasted money, and wasted money is a real bad thing. If you're in solo lane against 2 opponents, usually done when there's a jungler on your team, it's a lot more dangerous to harass. Usually you want to just completely avoid it, unless you know you're completely safe and they have no way to actually stun you or stop you from getting away, then it's a good idea to harass. You should probably do this behind the tower, or when they're just running away and wouldn't expect you to suddenly hit them with a move or an auto attack. Even getting last hits in a solo lane is very hard, so the idea you want to follow is sacrifice not risking dying for that last hit and just get experience from a distance. You're getting more experience than the 2 people you're fighting, so you're going to outlevel them eventually, and you'll find that you soon can actually fight back and take them. So how do we tie this in with the golden rule? The more you harass, the more the enemy will have to retreat, regen, or otherwise play passively, allowing you to farm more freely. As previously explained, harassing leads to them using their regen. Constantly harassing after they've wasted their regen and they have no courier means they have to go back and you get free farm. A little side note about aggression. If you have the ability to be aggressive, by all means try and be aggressive. Take whatever last hit, whatever harass you can do, put yourself ahead of the enemy team. But when you know that you can't harass or get that last hit, don't risk it. You will lose your health, you might die, you'll get last hits, and you'll be forced to play passively. If you harass constantly, then the enemy's going to be afraid of you, and will be much less likely to even engage you, and make poor decisions to try and restore balance to their lane, and make it so they can farm again. If you're forcing the enemy to lose their lane, they will be asking for ganks. You're very likely to be ganked in this scenario. So when you're winning your lane, and pushing up to their tower, and you're sort of in this awkward place where you need to farm, but you're far pushed up, you're very susceptible to a gank. You have to keep your eye on the map at all times for middle missing and such. Check the wards that have been placed down so you know when they're coming, and always have an eye on chat at all times in case mid or bot or top or jungle says miss and you might be getting ganked. Next up is hero choice. Regards to early game laning, not all heroes were created equal and balanced, so what hero should you choose? It's not always an easy question. A lot of this depends on your opponent's hero choice, skill level, in addition to many other factors. Playing heroes you aren't comfortable with or familiar with is pretty difficult, so before choosing a top laning hero or bot lane, know what skill builds and item builds you would go under which circumstances. Choose someone that you're familiar with. Stunners and combo nukers. Heroes with stuns work very well in laning. After all, when a hero is stunned, they can't deal damage, they can't escape, they can't fight back, and they're immobilized. Also, you are free to get a number of auto attacks in where they can't retreat. Particular combinations that work well are those which include 2 stuns. At least one of them can be on them for a long time. When multiple stuns are landed in conjunctions with normal attacks, the enemy will lose a lot of health, and usually all of it. With that being said, the enemy will be much more apprehensive when approaching creeps to last hit when knowing that you can double stun them. This is what you want an enemy to be aware and scared of. They're less likely to try and actually get creep kills and less likely to even get them at all if they know that you could suddenly burst them down. Once again, this is the golden rule. Some ideas to keep in mind and possibilities for offensive lanes. At least one hero in your lane should have a stun or a slow. They serve more than just one purpose. One, it damages the hero, and two, it prevents the movement of the hero. Unlike specific AoE spells, these don't miss and allow for nice combos with other spells, along with hitting multiple targets. At least one ranged hero in every lane. It is so important. 2 melee heroes in one lane means you're never going to get a last hit, because if they have one ranged hero, or even two, they can free harass you and can get last hits without having to come near you, and you're at this horrible position. You need cooperative teammates. This is the most important part of all. If you and the person in your lane aren't quite so aggressive as each other, then there's no way you can expect to dominate the lane. If he's passive and you're aggressive, then you're going to end up getting yourself killed. If you're passive and he's aggressive, then he'll get himself killed. If you're both overly aggressive, then you can do a lot of damage. If you're both overly passive, then you're probably not going to die and you're probably going to get last hit. If you're finding that your lane partner isn't working so well with you, and you'll often see things like, why didn't you go for that guy? Always explain what your plan is when you're attacking. Say, I'm going to attack this guy, and ping. Say, I'm going in now. Let them know what you're doing. Give them communication. Healers. Heroes that have a healing spell that raises your health are very useful in lane. They will have to purchase less HP regen items, which means they can save their money, means you don't have to spend as much money on regen items, so you save money, and overall they're just very helpful in team fights, keeping you alive when the enemy thinks you're really low. Many of the heals are instant, so they can be used for quickly gaining the upper hand in a fight, or baiting them in when you're on low health and then suddenly putting you on full health when they've attacked you. Babysitters. These are the heroes that are item independent, meaning they don't need items. They can support the person they're laning with by, using moves to heal them up, or provide stuns, but also provide them with free farm, so they find it easier to actually get last hits by harassing the enemy. These are best put together with someone who needs a lot of last hits and a lot of XP to be capable, hard carries. Babysitters aren't all defensive, some are offensive. They make it an easier time for the teammate because they are getting free farm. Last hitting and denying. Base damage and an attack animation are the biggest things here. If you have a higher base damage than the opponent, that means you will be able to attack the creep and get the last hit at a slightly earlier time than your opponent. You can increase your base damage by getting stat items, which you should already be doing. The stat items that you should be getting are for your hero's class, so if it increases your strength and you're a strength hero, then that'll make it easier for you to last it, and so on. These are often the best choice for starting items based on that fact. But remember, basic boots do not boost anything but movement. They do not give you better last hitting. The attack animation. Again, in this category, not all heroes are created equal, meaning that there are some imbalances with this. For example, imagine a sniper laning against a Crystal Maiden. That sniper, if he's competent, has a much faster auto attack. Although not doing as much damage, he can still get the last hit faster and quicker, and this Crystal Maiden will find it impossible to get last hits. This is because each hero gets their own unique auto attack. It is different for everyone. The attack animation might be slower but stronger, or faster but weaker. This is something that you just have to play and get experience and understand who has the better auto attack animations, who has slower ones, and so on. The only way you understand this is from experience. As said before, faster auto attack animations usually have an easier time to last hit than the slower ones like, Crystal Maiden and Lena's. Should I solo or should I not solo? Advantages. The golden rule is back again, no competition for gold amongst lane partners, and you are not splitting the experience. You level faster and you get more gold. Most commonly you're fighting less people, so it's easier for you to actually get those last hits and get the experience and less chance of dying. Don't use these reasons as an excuse to always call solo lane. It depends whether you're playing a character that can solo lane, and who you think you're going to be fighting in the solo lane. You have to remember that some heroes counter others. You shouldn't go solo lane if you feel like the people you're going to be fighting will counter you. Think about your team. Does someone gain a bigger bonus and help the team out more than your character would if they were solo? along with the skill level of the player. Can you solo? It is harder to solo. Disadvantages of being in the solo lane. You become the only target of the enemy. This means they will harass you and only you, and they will hit you with spells and only you with those spells. You might have been the target for attacks in the dual lane with someone at your side, but now the enemy has a much clearer target. There's no one else to attack. You carry more responsibility in your team. You are the higher level. You have got the free farm. It was easier for you to get to that stage than everyone else. Therefore, you need to be doing better than everyone else. That is your role as the solo lane. If you call solo and go solo lane and then aren't last hitting well enough and you find yourself against a tough dual lane, your teams might be doing alright, but they're sharing experience in dual lane. And if you die multiple times, then that's farm and XP lost. Now that you're not doing as well, you're doing as good as the dual lanes or worse. When you're supposed to be doing better, you need to always check who you're going to be fighting, check who you're playing, and know that you're good enough to be solo lane. It's going to be harder to harass the enemy, or even killing the opponent. To do with the first point as said, but you need to remember the golden rule that you need to stay alive for that XP and preventing them from getting their XP and gold. And it's harder to do that in solo lane. Blocking. This is the art of blocking the creep and making it take longer to even get to the actual lane. You might think this doesn't matter at all. You're wrong. If you block, then it means they have to be further along the lane to get XP. Sometimes, depending on the hero, if you block correctly in the right lane, their first wave will take auto attacks from the tower, meaning that you get to level 2 suddenly very quickly and you are at a massive advantage. Pulling. Pulling is when you take a neutral creep pack and get it to run into the creep lane and then fight the creep lane. Why would you do that? Well, if you're the jungle lane, and that means there's one person in your lane solo, they might have a problem fighting the dual lane based on the fact that they're pushed up, they're by the enemy's tower, and they're alone, so they can be ganked very easily. To pull, you pull the neutral creep into the lane, and then the creep will attack them. Often, if you do it correctly, maybe with a double stack, this means that your creep will die, and this XP will go to no one, and that gold will go to no one. It doesn't matter for you because they're your creep, it matters to the enemy because they're losing XP and they're losing gold. Not to mention that that lane is now pushed up based on the fact that the creep had no creep to fight. You need to take into consideration that pulling might not always be a good thing. Your team might be pushed up in that lane, and if you pull, they're just going to be further pushed up, giving that tower no real defense and causing an overall problem for your team member. Moving into the ganking phase and why ganking is so important. Ganking is one of the best means for hurting the enemy team, and it's very important to organise a kill on the enemy carry. At this stage, lanes can usually be quite messy, towers might have been destroyed and lanes might be pushed up. You need to find the enemy carry and kill him. The golden rule still applies, but there are now some other considerations. Mainly the farm and XP for a team's carry has a lot more valuable than farm and XP of a support hero. If you must sacrifice some of the farm for your team's support heroes while limiting the enemy carry, this is a fine outcome. But you have to remember that your carry is of great importance just like theirs, so the enemy will be targeting him for ganks. The importance of TP scrolls. Teleport scrolls are extremely important, as previously explained. They can save teammates and save towers. They can also help for sudden pushes. For ganking, teleport into an opposing lane, preferably when the enemy can't see you teleporting in, and then gank the enemy with a certain hero advantage. Counter ganks. You can suddenly appear in the fight by tower and defend your teammates, and even turn the tide of the battle and get some kills. Teamfights at towers. If you have a tower that's under attack from many enemy heroes, and you teleport in, perhaps with another, then you can defend that tower and prevent them from getting a gold advantage. Finally, knowing your opponents and their tendencies and abilities. This is something that develops over time, through experience. It's not quite as useful if you're not playing against the same people all the time, but it really helps to know how aggressive an enemy is. If they're really passive and defensive, then they're going to be harder to gank. If they're really aggressive and very easy to gank, then you should say in chat, mid, come gank, that type of thing. These sort of traits are something that you should know about your opponent to dictate how you should lane, whether you want to go for last hits or be more passive. Try to piece together everything you know about your opponent, the hero and the player, so that you're prepared for whatever they decide to do. Alright guys, that's episode 3. Some really important and useful stuff in there. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you found it useful. We'll be moving on to more advanced stuff next episode, and I hope you're looking forward to it because it's going to be good. See you next time.